Hi, I'm Bill. I want to share a few assembly tips for the Ruger Mark II and Mark III series. I have three pistols in front of me. This one's missing the bolt, so it's safe. The others are safety checked, and we're good to go. One of the most critical things in assembling the Ruger frame and barrel is the alignment or the overlap of the barrel to the frame. Put that closer to the camera so you can see it. The manuals are pretty vague. I'll get to that in a minute, but I'll say let's measure it. So I put my dial caliper right out to the edge there, and I get on this one about 50 thousandths. And you need to measure it in several different places because the back of this frame is a metal stamping and it's been ground down, and it's going to be a little bit different. So you should really measure it on your particular gun, take 3 or 4 or 5 readings and get a good average and write that down. Back to the manuals for a second. The Mark II manual says the rear end of the receiver is, when it is just even with the end of the grip frame, the barrel is aligned properly. The Mark III manual says push the barrel rearward until it stops with the rear of the receiver slightly overhanging the rear end of the grip frame. So that's kind of ambiguous. So for each gun that you have like this, measure it. You can even measure it on this one, which has got the bolt in place, and that's around 40 thousandths. And I can tell you each one of these guns, that one's 35 thousandths, this one's 40, this one's about 50 thousandths. So they're all going to be a little different. But there's one really good way of finding out if it's right. You can measure it, that's a good starting point, but you can also take your mainspring housing with your assembly pin, and instead of dropping it or pushing it in from the bottom after you go through all the procedures in the manual, you can just drop it in the top and see if it drops in. And you can see this one drops in nicely. It's really going through 3 holes. It's going through 2 holes in the barrel plus 1 there. And if it drops in nicely there, it will guarantee to assemble properly when you put it in the right direction this way. The other thing to consider is that when you assemble it in the final assembly, it's going to have the bolt mechanism. This mainspring housing and that stop bolt will come up through the bottom. The thing that would stop that is your return spring, which sits in here like that. The return spring has got this little U-shaped bracket. That U-shaped bracket is also a stamping. So one side is nice and rounded where the punch came through. The back side's got a burr on it. If that burr, for example, and you can actually feel it with your thumbnail, if that burr is going down and this pin comes up through there, it could stub or slow down the assembly process. If it's the other way, it's more likely to allow that thing to pass. So you can either orientate this thing so that as the bolt comes through it's going to be hitting the radius corner, or you can just take a small round tail, rat tail file and file that off and make sure that works. So give these 3 little tricks a try, and hopefully it helps assembly the gun. You have to follow the manual. It's very specific, especially with the magazine disconnector to Mark III, and good luck.